Good morning, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. A little quiet this morning because my kids are still in bed, so pause. My voice sounds a little different. Here we go, round 7. Moscow has fallen to the Germans. Moscow was an easy grab for the Germans. The Russians were not smart. They tried to play ping pong in Oral Kursk, and they lost a lot of key units. So not smart. Now, typically this may not happen in a game, Moscow falling this early, but it did, and I want to play it out and see what happens, because not everybody strategically is always going to make the best decisions, and this could happen. The Italians grab Oral Kursk as a can opener, so the Germans and their tanks, they've got about 12 tanks sitting in Moscow, could blitz through and capture Stalingrad next turn, and that is a problem for the Russians. The Russians, despite losing their capital, all the money goes to the Germans. They still have their pseudo capital here in Novosibirsk that can produce units next turn. And I think that the Russians, believe it or not, are still going to be able to spend $34 next turn based on all their territories. So that is pretty significant. The Germans have 140 to spend. Huge. So that is going to change the tide completely. What do the Germans do now? Do they head towards the Middle East? They help the Japanese go take care of the Russians sitting in their pseudo capital? Or do they help the Italians down here and grab Cairo? Or do they threaten Sea Lion? They've got a few options on the board. Lots of things happen when the Germans control Moscow and either Leningrad and Stalingrad, is that Spain becomes pro-Axis, which now the Germans are fighting. They tried to annex, I think it's Madrid, the capital. They didn't quite make it last turn. However, Sweden has been annexed by the Germans, and down here, Argentina and Chile. Chile becomes pro-Axis, and Argentina immediately flips to German, which triggers the Monroe Doctrine, and all the other territories become American. So the Americans decided to come down here and kill some of the now German units. There's a small German Navy down here sitting off Argentina. So rather than these units doing something else in Europe, they're now fighting in South America. The Allies are fighting the British. When Spain becomes pro-Axis, Portugal immediately flips, becomes British, and so they're now fighting over Barcelona. So there's about 10 American, Portuguese, and British units sitting in Barcelona, preventing the Germans from going down and annexing the capital, which then they would get this small navy. So lots happening. Definitely in Western Europe, the Allies are under threat. The British are building infantry now back in London to prevent a possible Sea Lion. And the Italians because they're going now into Russia, they're still making 25 a turn, despite the fact the British are a little bit cheeky here. They went and took Sicily and Taranto last turn. They lost a transport doing it. However, they now almost control all of Northern Africa. For how much longer, we'll see. Over here in India, the British decided or the FEC decided to wipe out the Japanese units that were threatening the Middle East. I think there was 9 units there, sitting there, and they were threatening Cairo, they were threatening Transjordan, they were threatening South Africa because of this naval base here sitting in Ceylon. So the British decided to take them out. However, did they expose their capital of Calcutta in doing so? We'll see. The units are fairly even, so we'll see if the Japanese take a swipe at Calcutta next turn. And the Japanese now are just reinforcing this territory up here beside the capital of Novosibirsk. And the British have helped try and reinforce the KMT with 4 units of their own. So what do the Japanese do? Which direction do they go? Do they focus on Calcutta? Do they focus on Novosibirsk? Do they wipe the KMT off the map? So they've got a few decisions to make. And the Japanese Navy's a little bit out of position. They're sitting at a naval base here at East Indies. And this is the British, the Anzac, and the Americans are all sitting off of Dutch New Guinea. That's the American Navy there. There wasn't enough space. So they're also at a naval base. But this, even though it looks bad for the Japanese definitely cannot attack. And if they were to remain where they are, definitely they would be under attack next turn, but they can get away. But having the American and combined Allied Navy down here is going to allow the Japanese to move their Navy back into position off of, it's been hiding up by Russia over there. There's a couple carriers and destroyers, and they are going to be able to build more Navy next turn as the second American Navy is sitting in Hawaii and being built back in San Francisco. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. There's going to be definitely a battle of attrition. Definitely the Japanese look like they're a little bit more under threat or, in trouble. Are they really? Well, I guess time will tell. Japan still has a sizable air force here. They built 3 medium bombers, or heavy bombers, I guess. No, they're medium bombers back home in Tokyo. So those are going to either head towards taking Calcutta, taking Novosibirsk, or wiping out the KMT. They also have a heavy bomber sitting in, or medium bomber sitting in Ceylon. So we'll see what happens. Definitely, do the Americans now spend bulk of their money in the Pacific, or do they spend it in the Atlantic? We'll see what happens. But definitely the Germans are going to be pumping out $140 worth of units next turn, and that is going to be problematic for the Allies in Europe. So stay tuned, folks. Which direction would you go if you were the Germans and the Italians? Thanks for watching.